Evening everyone and warm greetings to all. I, Shruti Sange, NSS volunteer of Saraswati College of Engineering, welcome you all to this webinar. As we all know, today, that is 23rd of June, is known for International Widow Day. United Nations ratified this day as a day of action to address the poverty and injustice faced by millions of widows. In India, there are certain regions where widows still have to fight for their rights and they have to go through a lot of problems during their widowhood. So, to give more valuable insights regarding this topic, today we have with us Advocate Ambreen Bashir Sheikh ma'am. She has done bachelor as well as masters in legislative law. She is practicing as an advocate since 5 years. She deals in civil as well as criminal matters. Ma'am, I request you to take over from here.
Good evening to all. On this International Widows Day, I would like to share with you all knowledge about the status of widow in India, the rights of widows and the laws relating to it. So firstly, before dealing with the laws or the rights of widows, we will see the status of women in ancient period, medieval period, and in the modern age. So what was the status of women in ancient period? How was it? So first we'll see this. So the historic, I would share the PPT, the slides also, you all can see. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, so first we'll start with the status of women in ancient period. So the historical analysis shows that women did not share an equal position with men. Women had high esteem in the society during that period. They also availed the right to education, liberty in the right of choice of their spouses. They can select their spouses, which was known as Swayamvar. In respect of widow too, they were given right to remarry. A widow had several options like Sahar Marna, means what? It was the voluntary joining the dead husband on his funeral pyre. There was also the process of niyog. It is the procedure through which a widow could brahmacharya, where she stops performing any sexual activity. She had also the option of finding another spouse of her choice. That time sati was popular, that was well known. Sati became popular during the later Vedic period, where the widows either choose for themselves or were forced to jump into the pyre of their husband so that they may not be spoiled afterward by others. Now this was the ancient period where sati was well known and there was option for the widow to take education, to gain education, we can say, or to remarry or even conceive another man's child. And now what was the status of women in earlier medieval era? So here there was a downslide as compared to ancient period. There we can see the downslide. Here traditions like widow burning or sati frame the patterns of social behavior of Hindu society for widows. The conduct towards them turned to be extremely unjust and sadistic. Conventionally, the widow was held responsible for her husband's death. Even the shadow of a widow was believed to be unlucky. It was also believed that once her husband died, the wife should pronounce all comforts of home. She should wear a plain white sari as a sign of lamentation. The appearance of widows at rituals, ceremonies, and celebrations was considered unpropitious. Like it was unauspicious for a widow to attend any ceremony or any celebration. Those coming from orthodox families, in some cases, even shave woman's head after the death of husband. So this happened during the earlier medieval era. Now we'll come to the modern age. What was the status in the modern age? Now how it is in the modern age. So Rajaram Mohan Roy supported women's right. He was known for his efforts to abolish sati pratha. and child marriage. Due to his enduring efforts, sati was declared illegal in 1829. Sati was also terminated during the British rule, and in 1856, the British validated widow remarriage in India. The law had come into existence that time. It has been 72 years since independence. Despite all of the advancements, still widows lead a dejected and miserable life in many towns of India. Widows in India no longer throw themselves on the funeral pyre of their husband. Now the situation has changed in the modern age, but life for them can still be deprived. The experience of widowhood varies across customs and time period. They are still subject to patriarchal traditions, religious legislations, and extensive prejudice in inheritance rights. Many families of different communities in India still achieve and abandon widows. Some of the widows here lead a disgusted life as they have no one to look after them, and they have to engage in practices like begging and prostitution for maintaining a sustainable life. Now, the Supreme Court, after taking into consideration all these things, the media reports of their discreditable living conditions in towns, ordered the government and civic agencies to make better living conditions of women in Vrindavan. Even the Uttar Pradesh government has also initiated to appoint a panel, a group, to collect data on the socio-economic conditions of widows. So now we can see the Vrindavan and Varanasi is known as the widow cities of India. Why they are? Can anybody tell me why the Vrindavan and Varanasi cities are known for this? Has anybody knowledge regarding this? Why these cities are known for widows?
No, ma'am.
Okay, then I'll explain why these cities are known for widows. Nobody can quite explain why these particular towns attract widows, because mostly after a woman, after the husband dies, why a woman goes to Vrindavan and Varanasi? Because some go to worship over there as genuine worshippers, to spend their remaining life in the service of Radha Krishna. But many others go there to get away from barbaric family homes, as they are considered as unwanted baggage. Because after the death of husband, a woman is like a burden for the family. Sometimes in the family, there is no one except the husband. So even if a woman is alone, so she spends her entire life in the service of Radha Krishna. And they have to engage in practice, and after that if there is no one to look after them, they are forced to engage in practices like begging, prostitution, and all these activities. Even the Supreme Court of India, after taking into consideration the condition of widows, they have ordered the government and civic agencies to make better living condition in both the cities. Even the Uttar Pradesh government is forming this panel, so the socio-economic conditions of widows gets better over there. And now we'll come to the rights of widows and its relevant laws. So after the abolition of sati, the Hindu Widow Remarriage Act came into force. Under this, the East India Company rule, which legalized remarriage of Hindu widows in all jurisdictions. And it was enacted on 26 July 1856. It was the first important social reform law after the abolition of sati by Lord William Bentinck, due to which widows are entitled to remarry on their choice. Because of this right, because of this law, a widow can remarry, and that too with her own choice. And after this, after remarriage, even she has right to acquire property of her late husband. Earlier, widows who decided to remarry were forbidden by laws. As we have seen, the status of women in ancient period, medieval period, they were denied of such rights. They cannot remarry, they cannot acquire the property, they cannot inherit, they cannot even adopt a child. did not have right to maintenance. Nothing as such was there in the ancient period or medieval period. But in the modern period, now we can see the change after the enactment of law. We can see that now and its relevant laws we can see one by one. Now we can see, according to Hindu Widows Remarriage Act 1956, if a widow has right to first of all remarry, but that marriage, the second marriage of the widow of her choice, was considered as valid. Nobody can say that the marriage is invalid, but it should be between two Hindus. She should be a Hindu first of all, and the person she is choosing to remarry, even he should be a Hindu. And nobody can say that the marriage is illegal or invalid. By any reason, we can say if she was previously married, we cannot say that the marriage is illegal. The Hindu Widows Remarriage Act legalized the remarriage of Hindu widows on 16 July 1856. And this act also provided all the rights and inheritance to all the widows that they have had at the time of a first marriage. And the enactment of the Hindu Widows Remarriage Act 1856 was a major social reform to improve the condition of the widow in India. And before this law, the custom of sati was abolished by Lord William Bentinck in 1829. First, it was abolished, and then after, this act came into force. And the draft for the Remarriage Act was prepared and passed by Lord Dalhousie. As per the Hindu Widows Remarriage Act, the widow is authorized to forfeit any inheritance that she may have obtained from her deceased husband. Means after the death of the husband, she can inherit the property of her husband, which the right is provided by this act. So the enactment of this act was one of the major social change in the 19th century in India. Since then, many such laws have been enacted in the country to protect the integrity and modesty of the woman. And now that was according to Hindu Marriage Act. And now how it goes according to Muslim marriage law. In this act specifically, there is no such law, but in Muslims, a marriage can take place. A widow can remarry after divorce also and after the death of the husband also. In the event of death of husband or divorce, the woman must first observe a period of iddat. Iddat means a period of like waiting, like after getting divorced, say, or after the death of the husband, she has to wait for a certain period of time before getting remarried. So what is the period? She has to be alone, and after that she can remarry. So we can see if the marriage was dissolved by divorce and had been consummated, then the period of waiting is of 3 courses of a menstrual cycle, or if pregnant, till the delivery of the child. So here after divorce, the period is 3 courses of a menstrual cycle. And then secondly, we can see if the first marriage ended due to the death of the husband, then irrespective of whether the marriage was consummated or not, she has to wait for 4 months and 10 days, or if pregnant, till the delivery of the child, whichever period is longer. After this period, she can definitely remarry the person of her choice. So this was according to the Muslim marriage. And here there is no act as such, but she can remarry after the period which is mentioned here. And then after this, property rights. After remarriage, what will be the property rights in Hindu law? So here in section 2 of Hindu Widows Remarriage Act 1856, all the rights and interests which any widow may have in a deceased spouse's property shall stop once she gets remarried, and the following beneficiaries of a deceased spouse or other individuals qualified for the property on her passing will immediately prevail to the same. But the Hindu Widows Remarriage Act has been repealed. Now the 1856 Act was repealed. Repealed means that got deleted, and instead the new Amendment Act came into force, which was shown in section 4 of Hindu Succession Act 1956. Succession means after the death of husband, she can have right to his property. She can take the property, she can get the property of a husband. Though according to the section 4 now, the widows who decide to remarry do have a right on the deceased husband's property within the provision of the Hindu Succession Act. She can succeed to the property of the husband. Whereas section 14 says that any property possessed by a female Hindu, whether acquired before or after commencement of the act, means before the act came into force, shall be held by her as full owner thereof and not as a limited owner. Even before the act, if she had acquired, the husband was dead, she can say that, yeah, I am the owner of the property now. Nobody can deny this right from her. While explaining, if anybody has any question, can ask me. And now, second, how the property rights a widow acquires in Muslim law. So now under Muslim law, no widow is excluded from the succession. This means that she can acquire the property of her deceased husband. A childless Muslim widow is entitled to 1/4 of the property. Means if a widow is not having any child, she'll get 1/4 of the property of the husband who is no more. And after muting his funeral and legal expenses, and how she'll acquire whatever will be his funeral and legal expenses, and after giving his death, the remaining out of that remaining property, 1/4 she'll be getting. However, a widow who has children or grandchildren, then she'll be entitled to 1/8 of the deceased husband's property. And if a Muslim man carries during an illness and subsequently dies of that medical condition without brief recovery or consummating the marriage, his widow has no right of inheritance. Here, how the widow will not get the property of her husband. If the man dies due to illness, or if the medical condition is such that the marriage was not consummated, means there was no physical relation between them, then in this case, the widow has no right to inherit the property of the husband. But if her ailing husband divorces her and afterwards he dies from that illness, the widow's right to a share of inheritance continues until she remarries. So your difference is what? If the husband is alive, but due to some illness, he is not able to maintain physical relation with her, then the widow has no right. But if the husband dies, and that time he didn't recover and died due to that illness, then after that the widow shouldn't remarry. Before remarrying, she can acquire the property of the husband. Now next we can see, if we take into consideration the Hindu law, Muslim law, as we saw now, the rights they may acquire after the death of the husband. So now what if they are denied from such right? What legal remedies we have? The widow may have the legal remedies. Now we can see, firstly, if the right is denied to her, if the property is denied to her, what she can do? She can send a legal notice to the party denying her rights in deceased husband's property. Suppose if a mother-in-law, say in-laws, if they deny, if they don't give the rights to acquire her husband's property, then she can send a legal notice to her in-laws and then accordingly file a suit for partition in civil court claiming her share, and that suit will go according to the jurisdiction where she stays or where they got married, the place of getting married, and accordingly it will go to that court. If partition of such property is not possible, the court can auction the property to give her share to the woman. Suppose if there is a partition, share in the property. So what will be the remedy? The court, after taking into consideration all the facts, will put the property in auction. And after the auction, whatever will be the valuation of the property, that the court will give it to the widow. She can also seek for injunction to ensure that the property is not sold. Suppose if she has sent the legal notice, so the period for the reply for the other party will be 15 days at least. So if they come to know that she has sent a legal notice or she will be filing the suit thereafter, so what she will be thinking that what if the property is sold by them? So even she can apply for injunction. Injunction means temporarily she can stop from selling this property. So what court will do? Court will put a stay on the selling of this property. If the property is even sold without her consent, she can add buyer as the party to the suit. What happens if without knowledge the property is sold, and before filing the suit or before sending the legal notice, if the property is sold, then she can also complain against the buyer. The buyer will be made as a party to the suit. So here she has the legal remedy to file a suit. Now, next we can see right of inheritance according to Hindu law. The succession and inheritance laws for Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and Sikhs are governed by Hindu Succession Act. For all these religions, the law will go according to the Hindu Succession Act 1956. The act makes no difference amongst movable or immovable property, whether the property is movable or immovable, but it will go according to the Hindu Succession Act, and that will be applicable to both man and woman. The act is applicable where there is no will or to intestate succession, and to any individual who has converted to the Hindu religion. So here what, if there is no will, a will is made sometimes. If a person has become old and thinks that no, after my death, there will be a fight in the family. So now how people are aware now about the law. So before that, they make a will that this my own property, so and so property will go to my son, my daughter, and whomsoever she or he wishes to give. So a will is made, and accordingly this act is applicable. Where this act is applicable? So this act is applicable if a will is not made. There are mainly two types of properties, namely like ancestral and self-acquired. A property acquired by our father's father, like that ancestral, very old property. And one property is where we own it individually, which is self-acquired. The ancestral property is one that is acquired up to 4 ages of male ancestry, we can say, with no division, and the right to share in it arises by birth. So the ancestral property, that share is we get by birth. Whereas the self-acquired property is the one that has been bought by the individual from his own assets or by any property procured from his share in ancestral property. Like the person who is the owner who purchases the properties, self-acquired, which is self-acquired by himself or herself. And as per section 10 of the Hindu Act, the appropriation of property happens among all heirs, including the widow of the deceased. Now, if there is a widow in the family and there is a division of property, so even the widow has right to acquire the property. She shall be given the share in the property. If the husband has left behind his widow as well as lineal heir. Lineal heir means what? Like the children in that same line, even if the others are entitled to the share, the widow is entitled to get still 1/3 of the share in his domain. Still the 1/3 is reserved for her, even if the deceased husband has others, like other legal heirs in the line. while the 2/3 will go to the later, like remaining first 1/3 will go to the widow and remaining 1/3 will be shared among the other legal heirs. Yet other relatives are present, then the 1/2 of the bequest goes to the widow and the rest to the, suppose in a lineal heir it will go 1/3, and in case if there are others also, means there are shares of relatives also, then in this case 1/2 will go to the widow and rest then to the related relatives, you can say, or children or other legal heirs. And the right, we can see now the right of maintenance in Hindu law. The right of maintenance means what? Like if a widow is not working, how she'll take care of herself, how she'll maintain herself. So here now there is a section in Hindu Adoptions and Maintenance Act which says, which gives the right of maintenance. So section 19 says that the maintenance of widowed daughter-in-law after the death of her husband by her father, like how she'll be maintained by her father-in-law in the event that she cannot maintain herself out of her own earnings or other property, or where she has no property of hers, she is not able to obtain the maintenance from the estate of her husband, parents or kids, then she should be maintained by a father-in-law. Father-in-law has the right to maintain her. Now in the recent judgment, if we see in a recent case where the judgment was delivered by Supreme Court of India, in case of, we can say, Ajay Kumar versus Latha Sharuti. In this case, Supreme Court maintained the choice of the lower court and directed the brother-in-law of the widow to maintain his brother's widow. Direction was given by court to the brother-in-law to maintain widows, to maintain the widow to the wife of the of his brother. Now there was two judge bench. They held that in a situation of a Hindu undivided family where the widow was not permitted to live in the society after her spouse's demise, and for fortifying and securing the right of the widow, court referred to section 2Q of the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, which stated that relief can be looked for against the relatives of the spouse also. Even the relative has right to look after the widow. And what maintenance, like how, if what she'll get, what amount she'll get monthly to maintain herself. The amount of the maintenance is one of the most significant questions to be determined, and the entirety of the sum is purely at the discretion of the court. Means the court will decide how much amount she'll get monthly, considering the situation of the in-laws, like how much the father-in-law is earning, how much property they have. Accordingly, court will give the decision. And in section 23 of Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, various grounds for determination have been provided, such as the background of the dependent, relationship with the deceased, reasonable wants, present condition, provisions in the will, the net value of the property, any death, number of dependents entitled to maintenance, etc. Like how many members are there in the family and how much the people in the family are earning, or considering all these factors, then the court will decide the maintenance, the amount to be given to the widow to maintain herself. And the significance of this section can be comprehended by its adaptability, which assists the court in finding out the sensible measure of maintenance. So here, the maintenance basically depends upon the income of the family and the number of members living in the family. And what is the right of maintenance now in Muslim law? That earlier we have seen that was according to Hindu law, and now in Muslim law we can see that the right of maintenance during the marriage is absolute, but after the dissolution of marriage, now at the start only when we say the nikah, so in the nikah only a consideration, like an appropriate amount is given to the bridegroom so that she can maintain herself, and that is the security amount given to the wife during the marriage. But after the dissolution of marriage, but when the marriage gets dissolved, her rights are limited. It becomes very limited. She is entitled to maintenance from husband after divorce, that is after maintaining the iddat period. Muslim law does not provide maintenance to wife after the iddat period. Means still when she is in that period, she has to maintain herself. So till that period, she'll be given maintenance. She'll be looked after by her in-laws or the husband say. But after that iddat period, she will not be maintained. In Hanafi school of law, there is one school of law called as Hanafi. Under that, a divorced Muslim wife is entitled to maintenance during iddat period, whereas in the other school, if we say Shafi'i law, there are subcastes, Hanafi law, Shafi'i law under Muslim law. And under Shafi'i law, we can see a divorced Muslim wife is not entitled to maintenance. Here, after the iddat period, a woman is not entitled for maintenance. And in case of dower, which is the right of Muslim wife, which she is entitled at the time of marriage, the husband is under the obligation to pay her if the marriage gets dissolved. In case of dower, we see. So the husband is under the obligation to pay her whatever the amount of dower has been agreed upon between the parties at the time of marriage. Before the marriage, only one amount is fixed. So when, in case of dower, so this amount is given to the wife. So she should be paid by the husband for her maintenance. And here there is one landmark case law on this maintenance. So here there was a case of Shah Banu Begum, who was a widow, and it was against Muhammad Ahmad Khan. In this case, Shah Banu Begum was a 62 years old lady, and she filed a petition under section 125 of Criminal Code before Judicial Magistrate of Madhya Pradesh. The petition stated that her husband has pronounced talaq, divorce to her, and she has not even remarried, and thus she was entitled to maintenance. Here, the husband has pronounced talaq, has given divorce, and she was not even remarried. She didn't remarry, and still she was entitled for this maintenance, for which her husband has stated that he had no liability to provide maintenance to her, as under Muslim law, a divorced wife has no right of maintenance after iddat period. As we have seen earlier, there was no right of women to get maintenance after iddat period. So husband has taken that stand that we have no liability to give. I have no liability to give my wife maintenance as per the Muslim law. But now we can see what court has ordered in this. The magistrate in this case passed an order stating that the husband is entitled to provide her maintenance of rupees 25 per month as per section 125 of CR. But still, look into consideration that woman is alone. She can't maintain herself, and due to old age also, she is not able to earn or to do anything for her survival. So the court ordered that time, during that period, that was in the year, I think 1985. So there the court had ordered to pay her rupees 25 per month. And Shah Banu filed a revision petition. Again on that petition, she has filed a revision against this order in the High Court. After that, she went to High Court of Indore for enhancement of the amount of maintenance, for which actually for her rupees 25 was less. That's why she went to a revision petition in the High Court of Indore, where the High Court has enhanced the amount of maintenance to 179 rupees 20 paisa per month. Means the High Court has increased the amount. First she was getting 25, and now after filing revision petition, now the court ordered to pay her rupees 179.20 paise per month. Against this order, Muhammad Ahmad Khan, the opposite party, appealed to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court rejected his appeal and stated that Muslim wife is entitled to maintenance even after the period of iddat if she is not able to maintain herself. What was held, that why the Supreme Court judge rejected the appeal of the opposite party? He took into consideration that the woman is not able to earn, not able to maintain herself. So she must be given maintenance even after the period of iddat. And Supreme Court has observed that with this judgment, the distinction between the Muslim personal law and the civil procedure code will come to an end. But the judgment has even increased the controversy, as a result of which legislatures have to make a new law to govern Muslim divorce, that is Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Divorce Act 1986. After this judgment, after this case, the new law came into force so that the Muslim widow can get maintenance. And now we can see what rights are given in the Constitution for a woman. So the constitutional provisions are: a woman has right to live with dignity, and these rights are available for all living beings. Every person has inalienable right to live with dignified life without any discrimination. And this is the one primary duty of each state, to protect fundamental rights to the human dignity and implement welfare schemes in order to improve the dignified life of the citizens. Under right to life, many more rights are there. And this right to live with dignity comes under Article 21A of the Constitution. And now, in one of the case, Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India, the Supreme Court gave a new dimension to Article 21 and held that the right to live is not merely a physical right, but includes within its ambit the right to live with human dignity. So, unlike this, a widow has also the right to live with dignity. And what, according to all the laws and everything, what we can conclude from this? We can see that the rights of widows should be respected and she should be permitted to live with dignity. And on this day, we solemnly take oath that the widow should have social, financial, and religious freedom to live her life in this complex world. A widow can also be your mother, sister, wife, friend, and neighbor. So it's our duty to protect their rights, to make aware that what are their rights, what are their legal remedies, so they can stand for their rights and live with dignity. So here I'm ending this session. If anybody has any queries, can ask me.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am, for your crucial knowledge. Our volunteers have some questions regarding this. So I'll ask it. Okay, so first question is, who qualifies for a widow pension?
See, according to this pension, if a husband is getting pension, so automatically a wife will get after the death of the husband. So be Hindu law, Muslim law, or in any other religion, after the death of the husband, a wife is entitled to get pension.
Okay. Second question is, how much social security does a widow receive?
Security is in the, as we have seen the rights and the laws, according to various sections of the Hindu Remarriage Act, Muslim Act. So accordingly, she is secured.
Okay. Is there any government scheme to benefit for widows?
Pardon, please?
Is there any government scheme beneficial for widows?
See, there are many schemes, but before that, the right of the widow should be maintained. A widow should opt for legal remedies, as I have spoken about it. So before applying for that scheme, it is beneficial for a widow to take her rights from the in-laws, which she has to go according to the laws legally.
Okay. How many type of widow cases you have dealt in your experience?
See, I actually deal with all civil, criminal, so there are like mixture of all. So till now, I have been with like 4-5 cases, and mainly I just draft legal notices for them. And if the situation is well and good, she gets the maintenance. We don't have to go to court and all. If the first step is to send a legal notice, if we send a legal notice and the opposite party is like well aware of the laws, they get scared, and accordingly they agree to give her the maintenance and all everything. So the legal aspect stops there, and she has no further any decision to go to court, because she will be, after that, after the notice, she gets the rights, she gets the maintenance, whatever we say. If there is domestic violence any of the kind, so we have to then file a petition or civil suit can be made.
Okay. So my last question is, what was your personal experience regarding these cases about widows?
So the experience, you see how still, in spite of so many laws and everything, the experience is, see, if we are dealing, if I'm dealing in a case and the family is educated, so it depends a lot, like it differs a lot. They are the educated people are like more, more knowledgeable, and they know. So there the matter is like more easily, solved. But if the people, the family is uneducated, so we have to deal with lots of problem, because they are unable to know the laws, the knowledge, they don't acquire anything. So there we have to like face lot of problem. So the experience, we can't say it is good, because we know that if a person, if a widow, if she is going through pain, if she is like going through worse phase of life, so we can't say that it is good, but we try to solve it so she leads a better life.
Okay. What apart from this, is there anyone who wanted to ask any other question to ma'am? Please unmute yourself. Or you can drop in chat box. Okay, I think there is no questions anymore.
No more questions?
Yeah. So on behalf of everyone present here today, I would like to thank Advocate Amreen ma'am for taking the time from the busy schedule to speak to us. The information you gave today was very helpful. And also thank you our principal, Dr. Manjusha ma'am, Dean, HODs, teachers, and all the departments. Also our PO, Dr. Sunita Pal ma'am, for her support and guidance. Now I would request everyone to switch on their cameras so we can take a photo. Please switch on your cameras.